Hey, you guys, today I want to talk about producer agreements. So, if you're producing music for long enough and you're good at it, you're probably going to come up to some point, some time when you need to create an agreement between yourself and an artist. So, I want to take a look at a producer agreement for a record that I did a while back. I just want to kind of review the highlights. I'm not going to go into great detail because it kind of gets pretty legal and somewhat boring. But I do think if you're a producer, it's worth seeing how a producer agreement's laid out, the types of things that you run into, and maybe most importantly, I want you to see why you don't need to be doing a producer agreement without hiring an attorney, having someone to look over and help negotiate on your behalf, because there are things in the contract that will just probably be beyond you unless you have some serious legal expertise. So here we go. So I'm not going to get into the detail of what record this was for. I'll tell you that it was two producers, in this case, myself and another guy, and we were working for an artist that was signed to Island Def Jam. So right here on the first page, you're going to see that what it does is it establishes some language or terminology. Like, for instance, in the first paragraph, it refers to the agreement and then puts in quotations the agreement between the artist's name, which is going to be referred to as me. What it's doing right now is it's establishing the terms that will be used throughout the contract. So it simplifies up front that when you see me in the contract, that's the artist. When you see the agreement, that's referring to this contract or declaration. And if you see company, for instance, you'll see that down here, it's Island Def Jam. That's company. So every time company is referred to, you know it's the label. Also, a term that comes up here is masters. So let me talk about masters for a minute, just to kind of clarify what that's referring to. Sometimes we think in terms of the actual audio recording. We think what we hear, the final process of a mixed record is when they send it to the master. That's mastering. But in the context of an agreement like this, that's not what it's referring to. When it refers to the master, it's actually referring to ownership. It's referring to a copyrighted recorded work. So when somebody owns a master, it doesn't mean that they own something physical. They don't own a 24-track tape. They don't own some kind of digital recording. What they're owning is kind of this abstract copyright idea of the recording itself. There's two levels of copyrights when we think of songs and the actual sound recording. When we talk about a song, we'll talk about a copyright, the copyright. But when we talk about the sound recording, the ownership of that creative work, refer to it as a master. In the sense of a contract, it's not referring to a tangible object like some, acetate or some tape or something like that. It's referring to the abstract creative work. I hope that makes sense. So when you see that term pop up in an agreement, that's what it's referring to as ownership of that sound recording. And one of the things you're doing with this agreement is you are signing your rights of the master over to someone else. And that's one of the reasons you are getting paid. You're getting paid not just to produce your record, but for the ownership of the actual sound recording. So with respect to that, let's look at this point number 2, services. I hereby acknowledge that you have satisfactorily performed all services required of you hereunder and timely delivered the masters hereunder, and that company has accepted the masters. The masters shall be recorded pursuant to a recording budget approved and administered by the company. Okay, so that's really kind of old school, really. It's not necessarily that you will always have a specific budget given to you by a company to record a record, especially these days. Really, making records can be very, very cheap these days, right? So you're making a lot of them in your home studio. All right, so this is something worth saying. This is in Section 2, subsection 2. It says, each person rendering services under your direction or control will grant to me and company, remember that's the artist and the label, the rights referred to in this agreement, and has the right to render such service and grant such services. So this is talking about hiring musicians, renting out studios, hiring engineers, anything that's associated with creating this record. It's saying essentially you're not going to go out and hire somebody that doesn't have certain rights to be able to do this without having restrictions that are going to somewhere in the process of the record fall back on the record company or fall back on the artist. All right, so let's take a look at this section. This is a big deal. Compensation. It says, provided that you have timely performed all of your material obligations hereunder and are not in material breach thereof, in full consideration for your services hereunder in connection with the masters, I shall pay you or cause to be paid to you. That's the case, by the way, with most of these deals. Even though the contract is between the producer and the artist, the payments are always coming from the label. If there's a major label, the payments will be coming from the label. They'll pay you the advance. They're the ones that calculate and pay you the royalties. And that's because the label is the one that receives the money. So they actually take the producer's piece off the top before they send the artist their royalties. They break it all up so that the producer gets their royalties, the artist gets their royalties. But the actual agreement is still between the artist and the producer. All right, so producer fee advance. So remember, there's two things that you want to establish with regard to compensation: advances and royalties. Producer fees in the following respective amounts shall be payable to you within 5 business days following the full execution of this agreement. All right, so that's the spot where it tells you how much you're going to get in advance. What it really is an advance on actual royalties that are generated by an album, actual income. So really, when you receive this advance, it's against the hope that you are actually going to make money with this record. But because it's an advance of any future royalties, that means that once you've been given this advance, until the advance is recouped, and that means that basically the royalties have built back up and the company has been paid back the advance that they gave you. Until that comes, you will not see future royalties. So basically the advance is just a loan against the future royalties. All right, so now in section B here, we're going to talk about the royalty itself. So 3% of the applicable royal base price in respect of the net sales of top-line records solely embodying the masters which are manufactured and sold throughout normal. All right, so this is your back-end royalty rate. You can refer to it as 3% or 3 points. All right, so we're still under the heading of compensation, but for a minute I just want to talk about a legal language in these contracts and show you why it is that you really, really need to do this with an attorney. It says right here under section 4, if you have fully complied with all your obligations hereunder, after the masters have been delivered to me and company satisfactorily as defined in the recording agreement, I shall not, without your written consent, reduce the royalty payable to you with respect to the masters, nor shall the royalty payable to you hereunder be reduced by any royalty payable to a third-party mixer or remixer. If you saw how these contracts sort of evolve from the first time they're handed over from the record label / artist to the producer's attorney, they look very different than the final revision, because what happens is when your attorney gets this agreement, they'll start redlining things. They'll start crossing things out, writing in things that they want for you. So they're basically countering the offer that is being given in the agreement. This is the negotiation process. What's essentially happening is they're fighting for you, because when that contract first comes, it's going to be slanted in the favor of the artist and company. So your attorney's trying to make sure that anything he can carve out for you in the agreement to make it as fair as possible for you, that's what he's going to do. Okay, here's something that's worth seeing. This is under accountings and statements, and this is talking about your right to audit the record company / artist. There's going to be some point that you might want to get an accountant to go in and do an audit for you. Quite often they can shake out some money from these companies that's been sitting, and it's not necessarily that a company's been holding back per se on you. An audit is just a way to kind of clean house. Section C here says, without limiting the foregoing, All royalty statements rendered to you hereunder shall be binding upon you and not subject to any objection by you for any reason. So again, hire an attorney. You shall have the right at your sole cost and expense once within the 18-month period after a statement of account is rendered upon 30 days written notice to me to conduct a reasonable examination during usual business hours of my books and records at the place where such books and records are kept with respect to such statement or account. Okay, so that's very interesting how that's worded. And again, that's why you absolutely want an attorney to make sure that they have looked over the language and it's as much to your benefit as they can make it work. Here toward the end, there's this clause about credit. And this just basically establishes how your credit is going to be listed whenever there's any type of label copy. Label copy is any time it establishes credits. If it's in a CD and there are liner notes, for instance, they're going to put it a certain way. If it's on a rolling credit after a movie, this is how you're going to be stated as the producer is such and such, whether it's you or your company. And on this last page here, it shows who's actually making the agreement. It's signed by the artist and by the producers, and you won't see anybody associated with the record label here. It is, again, this agreement is between the artist and the producer. All right, you guys, so I know there's a lot of legal language in this video, and I tried to just highlight things out of an agreement that I thought would be interesting to you, but it's absolutely worth you knowing some things about this. If you're in this game for the long haul, you'll be signing one of these deals eventually, and when you do, definitely hire yourself an attorney, and when you do, hire someone that's well experienced, someone that does a lot of these type of agreements. When you do that, your attorney and the artist's attorney are probably two individuals that have worked together before. It's an easy working relationship, and these agreements can be knocked out in a pretty efficient time frame, which is important to you because if you're paying an attorney, say, $400 an hour, okay, you want him to get done quickly and efficiently. All right, you guys, I hope this was worthwhile. If it was, please give me a like, please subscribe, hit that notification bell, and until next time.